Hi, Lou Pulsfer here to talk briefly about the 80-20 rule, which the real name for is Pareto Principle. But most people know it as the 80-20 rule. It's a well-known rule of thumb. And essentially it says roughly 80% of effects come from 20% of the causes. Now this was originally about land ownership and pea production, but it applies to a great many things, including game design. But here are some other applications from Wikipedia. Over 80% of the world's income is in 20% of the people. 80% of a company's profits come from 20% of its customers. 80% of a company's complaints come from 20% of its customers. 80% of a company's profits come from 20% of the time its staff spend. 80% of a company's sales come from 20% of its products. 80% of a company's sales are made by 20% of its sales staff, and so forth. How does this apply to game design? Well, the number one thing is that it's relatively easy to get a game to the 80% point, where it works, but where it's not much of a game, not all that interesting or enjoyable. It's the last 20% of the improvement that's the hardest. But that's also what makes the game worth publishing, if in fact it's worth publishing. And as you know, I think many games that are published weren't really worth publishing. But that last 20% of the improvement may take 80% of the time that you spend on the game. So people who are not very good game designers will get their game to the 80% point and think that's good enough, and they perhaps have spent 1/5 the time of someone else who's got their game to the 100% point. There was a time when video game companies often spent most of their time getting to the 80% point, and they didn't have the time to do the last 20% properly. And that still happens with things like movie tie-in games, which is why movie tie-in games are so often really poor games. Here are some more examples that might apply to game design. You can ask yourself, will 80% of my useful playtest results and suggestions come from 20% of the testers? Probably, but keep in mind that all the testers are helping you decide whether the game is a good game. It's just that 20% of them are going to be a lot more active and directly helpful. For video games, primarily, you can say 20% of the consumers will never be satisfied. Concentrate on the other 80%. 20% of your games will be published, others not. Well, I'm not sure I'd go that far, but it may be true for most people. Even people who are very successful, like L&R Moon, say that a large proportion of their games, a majority of their games, will never be published. Will 80% of the misunderstandings of your rules for tabletop games, where you have rules, come from 20% of the rules? If so, can you find a way to get rid of some of those rules? Will 80% of your software bugs for video games come from 20% of the game? Is there a way that you can eliminate some of that 20%? So in general, you can see awareness of this rule of thumb may help you design games more efficiently